In writing an academic essay, be sure you understand the question first. While this may seem obvious, different words mean different arguments. Explaining something requires a different action than comparing. In the example, is English a killer language? For this particular example, we have to make a judgment. That is, whether we agree or disagree with the question. From there, we may argue why we agree or disagree. And then we might consider the perspectives we haven't thought about. Does English kill with intent? Does it save other languages? Or is English living? From here, we need to choose the arguments that are relevant and interesting. Once we have a general idea about what we are going to argue, we then look to structure, or the organization of our arguments. Essay structure is usually broken down into three parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. The introduction is used to define your interpretation of the question. Also, you need to let the reader know what you are going to argue. This is usually only one paragraph long. Moving on to the body, you will need to persuade the reader to agree with your arguments. You also need to use strong examples to justify your arguments. You should try to only use one argument per paragraph, and the body should be made up of several paragraphs. In looking at the structure of a paragraph, you need to argue a point related to the topic, use an example to illustrate your point, and then relate this point to your next argument. And finally, the conclusion. This is where you should give no new information. The conclusion is for summarizing your arguments, and is usually only one paragraph. Style is knowing who you are, what you want to say, and not giving a damn. Thank you, Gore Vidal. In looking at academic essay style, you need to avoid using personal pronouns. For example, instead of saying, "My essay will discuss," you need to say, "This essay will discuss." Keep your sentences short. Avoid contradicting your argument. Don't include irrelevant information. And be effective, not repetitious. To illustrate this last point, I would like to use an example. It would be repetitious to say, "A large, big, huge ship sailed into the harbor." It would be more effective to say, "A large ship sailed into the harbor." If we are going to talk about style, we also need to talk about language. The good essay uses persuasive language. It avoids cliches. It avoids colloquial language such as slang, and asks rhetorical questions. Academic essays are usually written in the third person. Lastly, you need to be wary of bias, or only taking one perspective. Good academic essays will voice the potential criticisms of their position. And avoid generalizations. These are assumptions not based on evidence or supporting examples.